My name is Usenica, and I'm genuinely nervous to make this video. The title is one that you could call controversial. I do not feel it is controversial, and I am nervous for the people that are not open to genuinely hearing what I have to say, but I'm not making the video for them. I'm making this video for me, for fellow adoptees, for anybody who's interested in hearing an adoptee speak. It's hard to be vulnerable on the internet because you know that not everybody's dedicated to understanding you and your message. But if you are, this video is for you. If you are dedicated to misunderstanding or disrespect or simply just being ignorant and not really talking about what I presented in the video, you are not welcome on this channel. I want to get into the topic that I've been thinking about for the past couple years, which is not everyone should adopt. When I say not everyone should adopt, I think that the people who are hesitant to listening to me, the people who are hesitant about listening to me, think that I'm saying not every child should be adopted, or they're just mad because they have some sort of superiority over the fact that everyone should have access to everything at all times. Let me so clearly lay out what I'm saying. I believe every child deserves a home, safety, security, love, and happiness. I believe every child should have access to that. I believe that every child should be entitled to those things. Children should expect safety and comfort, okay? However, in the spirit of the fact that I believe every child should have easy access to love and happiness, I believe the people who should adopt should be dedicated on providing that. And I feel as though the people that are going to provide that easiest are the people who are dedicated to being educated on the adoption system, on adoptees, on the history of adoption, and on how they can best be the best adopters they can be. Those are the people that I think should adopt. I do not think it's a difficult prerequisite. However, that's why I say not everyone should adopt, because I do not think that everyone meets that prerequisite. But a lot of people say all you need is love. But I think that that really avoids a lot of crucial conversations that come with education. Adoption is so incredibly complex. Adoption is in a lot of ways mishandled, especially because not a lot of people know this, but adoptees are 4 times more likely to commit suicide than non-adoptees. Unfortunately, a lot of people's opinions about adoption come through stories of fiction, and the realism of what it is to be an adoptee, the stories that are true, the stories that are damaging to adoptees are not often spoken about or exposed at all, because a lot of people have this idealized view of adoption that when an adoptee says something that goes against the kind of popular notion, in a lot of ways, I know that a lot of people like to be defensive about their own popular notion, and then we'll just say things like, a child just deserves a home. Like, it doesn't matter where that home is, a child deserves to be in a home. What, you want to take away a child's home? Or I'll say something about how, like, if you are adopting transracially, I think you have to be so incredibly educated and you can't be colorblind. A lot of people think, oh, well, white people just can't adopt children now, can they? White people can't do anything, you know? And they like completely discount the fact that I am a transracial adoptee. My parents are white. And I think that there's this hesitance towards any person of color speaking out about their experience being a person of color. All of a sudden it's, you're just obsessed with race. Race isn't everything. But it's like, I'm speaking on my experience. Why are you hesitant towards listening about my experience? Especially because I handle a lot of the topics that I'm talking about with care and empathy. Especially because I've lived in a majority white family, in a majority white city, in a majority white state, in a majority white nation for a long time. So I'm not speaking with hate a lot of the time to keep myself safe. And then also, I'm trying to be understood. But people like look at people of color speaking about their own experience and saying, well, I think that maybe if you are colorblind, you believe that race doesn't matter and maybe you shouldn't adopt. All of a sudden, I'm like threatening you. Well, then I guess you just don't want people to be adopted. So then what do you want? I'll tell you. You could have asked me nicely. I want people who are incredibly dedicated to being educated about what it means to be an adoptee, just for the simple idea of typically when you know better, you do better. And as somebody who has felt suicide in the past, and as somebody who has had very isolated thoughts and has felt like she can talk to no one and has got the courage to talk to like my channel about this and been validated at times, I want to speak about this and hopefully educate the people that need this, that need this, that want this, that are seeking this out. I hope that educated people and the right people are seeking out the system, because I feel like, because due to the fact that adoption is mainly exposed through fictional stories, that does create a decent amount of harm. We saw it with the Stafford family? The Stafford family, if you don't remember, a couple years back, they adopted a special needs child abroad. They thought that they could take care of him, and they couldn't. And there's actually so many stories that are similar to that. People think that they can adopt, it's too much for them, and then they give the child back into the system where they're either fostered, adopted, or they age out of the system. Or even stories like, you know, the story that The Blind Side was based off of? Apparently it was all completely wrong and he was just exploited. If you're an adoptee who's aware, like aware socially of what the system has, I believe in the goodness of the system. I believe in the goodness of people. I want to believe in the goodness of the people who are adopting. When I was in college, I wrote my big final last paper. It was like a 30-page long paper on transracial adoption and its effects on mental health. And I had already felt a pull towards finding out more about adoption before that paper, but knowing what I know now, and having read the books that I have read, and also having this cute little channel or whatever where I sit down and just gab forever about things that do not matter. Since this matters so much to me, I do want to include some resources below with books that I've read that have really helped me understand the system of adoption, what adoption does socially and mentally. But I also want to leave the resources specifically because when I say I want people to be dedicated to education, I don't mean that you have to have like higher education as well. I don't think the qualifier should be that you have to be college educated, you have to have a high school degree. I just think that you should seek out specific information related to adoption, the systems, and the people that make up the system, adoptees themselves, so that you can give a child the best life you can. There are really common ways that people talk about adoption that just feel fumbled all the time. Whenever somebody says, "Oh, I don't want kids," there's always somebody in the background to be like, "Why don't you just adopt?" Like as if adopting is something you can just do. Adoption, as I understood it in my experience, it's born from trauma, and I hope that a lot of adoptees know that. Or adoptees. I hope that a lot of adoptees and adopters can get familiar with that and know that just because adoption is born from trauma doesn't mean that your life will be horrible and horrific. Your life can still be beautiful and meaningful and have so much value. My life has so much inherent value. But like this idea that adoption is just an alternative to what will happen if you can't have a biological child or if you don't want a biological child is very interesting to me in a very like kind of uncomfortable way, because I think there are some people who are like truly just afraid of giving birth and are just like, "Oh, just adopt." And think it's like kind of the easier way to go, which as somebody who's like afraid of everything, I want to sympathize with that one. I really, really do. However, I feel since listening to other adoptee stories on when they get adopted and they thought that they couldn't have any children, and then they get children, and then the adoptee feels a certain way because there's like a certain type of treatment that happens between biological children and adopted children. You can look into that. It makes me like uncomfortable because I feel like the communication is kind of adoption is the scapegoat out of pain from birth, when adoption should just be your means to providing life for a child. I don't quite know how to speak about my concerns in that way because I understand, but I also am a little bit uncomfortable. I've said this a couple times, but there is a strong theme between people who adopt and people who claim that they don't see color. And then in the middle, well, not in the middle, but like somewhere in between there's like Christian people. Like I was raised Christian. I still am kind of figuring out my relationship to faith. I feel like it, oh my God, dramatically shifted as I'm in my 20s now. My relationship to God is very much my own. But I feel like there's this emphasis on the idea that no matter what you do as it relates to you being a parent or you having a relationship with somebody and you are just a kind-hearted person, that no matter what, like, you're good as a person. If you are somebody who adopts children of color but then claims to not see color, it doesn't matter if you are incredibly flawed and maybe have history of racism. It doesn't matter, because as long as you're dedicated to loving the child, then you are entitled to that child. And I don't like that. Not because I don't believe in redemption, not because I don't believe that only perfect people should get to be parents. It's just because I believe that that creates more harm. Because I feel as though there's a lot of ignoring, there's a lot of avoiding going on in the idea that all you need is just love. Because I don't think that all you need is just love, especially talking to fellow adoptees. A lot of us really just needed validation growing up. My parents, I've already mentioned, are great because they're dedicated to being educated and listening to me. However, growing up, there were some things that were like fumbled. Like, I'm also very sensitive because I've the worst thought, the thought that I go to in my darkest spaces are just, of course this is happening to you. Of course people are abandoning you. Of course this bad thing is happening to you. Of course, blah blah blah. This happened because like your original family didn't even want you. Of course this is happening because insert whatever story I've told myself, because I wasn't wanted at birth. And I was wanted later, which is like, thank God, I've learned everything. I've grown. This is who I am. I'm like, this is who that made me who I am today, whatever. But at the end of the day, I am just an adult trying to soothe my inner child. And I kind of wish that I kind of wish that I was seen in a different way and I was validated. You know, like I mentioned, every child deserves happiness and safety and security, and every child should have easy access to that. It'll make it easier if the people who are wanting to adopt are dedicated to understanding, because if they know better, typically they'll do better. Respectfully, let me know how you felt about this video. I appreciate you watching and being dedicated to understanding me and in a way kind of healing my inner child. I'll talk about adoption again on another day. It might be like in a couple days or a couple months or a couple years. I don't know. It's kind of hard on me every time I speak about it for real. Hope you have a valuable morning, afternoon, or night.